Hey everybody, here's a solution for day 1-3 factoring, question 5b. I'm just going to shrink that down a little bit. I'm going to go through this one maybe two different ways. I'm going to maybe make an assumption of something you may have done, and then maybe I'll show you what I think is the best way. I think it's very plausible that you take a peek at this and you look at the last two terms and you say, hey, I see a G in there, but also an X. And so maybe you common factor out a negative GX, and that leaves you with 1 minus X. And you do a quick check, you re-expand, you notice you get back to the original. Now you take a look at that and you recognize that within that you have two terms, and those two terms have a common factor, and what's screaming at you is that bracket factor, that 1 minus X. And so you common factor out the 1 minus X, and you are left with G minus GX. Now, maybe because I'm saying this out loud to you, that really drew your attention to the fact that that was not fully factored. But maybe just writing it, you now skip over, move on to the next problem, and we don't recognize that that second factor could be factored further. Take a look at that second factor and notice there's a G in both of those terms. So if we were to common factor out that G, then maybe you write it this way. We just need to recognize that's bad form for two reasons. Number one, that's a monomial. Proper form is going to say put the monomial out in front. Secondly, you're going to notice that you have one factor of 1 minus X, another factor of 1 minus X, and since you have that repeated multiplication with factors, write it as a power. So the best way to write that gold solution would be to say, I recognize the common factor in the last factor. I'm going to write it out in front. You might not see it happening until you write it. Factor out the G, factor out the G. Then you say, oh, look, I've got two factors of 1 minus X. And now we can write it in better form. And there we go. So I think that that is a very usual solution with regards to factoring that expression. Like, I think that would be pretty common. Okay, what if we tackle it a different way, though? My suggestion to you is always, always, always look for a common factor first. But because of those brackets in that first term, maybe you just zero in on that as one term, and then these distinct second terms and third terms that you get focused on factoring by grouping. That would not be my suggestion. So how many terms do I have? 1, 2, and 3. Is there something in common in all three terms? Yes, there is a common factor of G. Now, if I factor a G out of that first term, I'm just going to put the brackets in to maybe help you, but they are by no means needed. I would be left with the 1 minus X. If I factor out a G from the second term, I'm left with a minus X. And if I factor out a G from the last term, I'm left with an X squared. Okay, you take a look at that green line, and maybe you see that stuff on the inside could collect. That is, you may be inclined, as you should be, to simplify that expression and get to that. What does that leave you with now? Well, now that leaves you with a trinomial on the inside. You notice you have a positive leading coefficient. So you're saying two numbers that multiply to give 1 and add to give -2, that would be -1 and -1. And so your next line may end up being, hey, 1 minus X times 1 minus X. But I think you would be more inclined when you are factoring that trinomial, because it's in that form, to just say, hey, two numbers that multiply to give 1 and add to give -2, that's -1 and -1. Hey, I'm going to have a perfect square. And so you can write it directly that way. Okay? I think that the green solution is a better solution, not because it takes fewer lines, but really it's what I'm circling in red. I think it is really, really easy to factor that, forget to look for that common factor inside the second factor, and move on to the next problem without being fully factored. If you take care of your common factor in the first line, you never have to worry about it. Okay? I'm hoping that helps you through problem 5. Best of luck with the rest of your practice.